Welcome, gang. How many people on this call are netting at least $1 million or more a month? That's right, $1 million or more a month. If so, maybe this call is not for you. But let me ask you another question. How many people on this call, when I asked the first question, found themselves struggling to wrap their minds around netting at least $1 million or more a month? How about $1 million a year? How about $500,000 a year? How about 300K? Hey, if I'm speaking to you, no worries. I was in that position before I met the fellow I'm about to introduce. One more question. Who on this call would like to net $1 million or more a month, or $1 million a year, or $500,000 a year, or 300K a year, or a number that is definitely something that would be great to have but you're not currently experiencing? I promise you it can be done. But one thing's for certain, you got to believe it to achieve it, and more importantly, you got to believe it to receive it. At least that's my experience. And when I think back to where I was, working harder wasn't getting it done. Sometimes best efforts just aren't enough. The question you need to ask yourself is, what's missing in your life that, if present, would literally transform your life beyond your wildest dreams? How many of you would like to know what I discovered and how, when applied, has produced a life of abundance that I only once dreamt of? No question, there's a lot of pain in this world right now, and I know a lot of us on the call are experiencing it. The fellow I'm about to introduce you to likes to remind me that in order to do something better, to create a real breakthrough, you need to take action and you need to do it differently. We all know that if you want to do something better, and you do the same thing as before, what'll you get? We all know what we call that, right? So to do something better, you got to do it in a way that requires you to do it differently. True or false? What we're really saying is better is always different, but different isn't always better. I'm talking about doing it different better. So ask yourself, is what I've said so far resonating with you? Does it make sense? If you're not making the kind of money you would like to make, if you don't have the relationships that you really want to have and deserve, if you haven't had the kind of life that some of us only dream about, obviously you're going to have to invest your time and attention in a different way. It's true, isn't it? So think about it. For you to make at least $1 million or more a month, or $1 million a year, or $500,000 a year, or 300K, and have a life that most people only dream about, wouldn't it require making a significant breakthrough in how you see and recognize opportunities? That was the case for me. When I met the person I'm about to introduce you to, I was 18 and eager, but had no clue as to what to do. Fortunately, after meeting this person, I was introduced to a whole new way of thinking. After spending only a few days together, I viewed the world with a much more resourceful perspective. What I once considered my weaknesses, I soon viewed as unique strengths. Imagine what would happen if you were introduced to the theories, methods, and tools that, when applied, can create transformational breakthroughs in a highly predictable fashion. If you knew this were true, do you think you would muster the courage and commitment and take the necessary action to make it happen? Well, I did. You know, it's funny. Most people think it takes money to make money. And in my experience, that's just not true. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually one of the biggest myths out there. What it takes is desire and commitment, coupled with what I'm convinced are two of the biggest scarcities on our planet. What do you think those two things are? You know, when I ask this, rarely does anyone come up with the answer that most often applies. What do you think they are? Two of the biggest scarcities on the planet today are time and attention. And hey, the good news is we all have the same amount available to each of us. Think about it. Who determines where and how you focus? Remember, wherever you focus, there too goes your time and attention. It's true, isn't it? In my experience, how we choose to leverage our time and attention is a function of attitude and personal choice. As I suggested earlier, you're going to need to go about things in a different, better way. As you listen to what I'm saying, I invite you to begin holding on to what you think you know just a little more loosely. My invitation as you listen is try on these concepts and distinctions like a shirt or a blouse, as if you were to go shopping. If it fits, leave it on. If it doesn't, feel free to put it back on the rack. And given that oftentimes best efforts aren't just not enough, you're going to have to learn to ask the right questions and learn to know what to do. Can you think of a more paradoxical time in history than now? Let's face it, never before has there been a more volatile time. Paradoxically, there has never been an easier time to accumulate great wealth. According to Google's president, Eric Schmidt, the amount of information from the beginning of time through 2003 is now doubling every 2 days. And by the end of this year, it will be doubling every 2 hours. The man I'm about to introduce you to has taught me that information is power and key to creating wealth. Never before has information been made available more so than now. Have you ever heard the expression that your net worth is often equal to your net work? So when I ask you to consider what's missing that if present would transform the quality of your life beyond your wildest imagination, think about the network you have now versus the dream team available to you through the people and friends of those you would most certainly meet should you embrace the opportunities I'm about to share with you. Having accessibility to and knowing the right people is key to accelerated wealth creation. So I'll ask you again, how would you like to learn how to net at least $1 million or more a month, starting with nothing, or $1 million a year, or $500,000, or $300K, whatever that perfect number is for you? I can assure you it's going to take an investment of your time and attention, and it's going to require that you commit to staying on this call for the remainder of the next 40 minutes. In making your decision, let me ask this. How many of you have ever made a mistake? And how many of you ever made a mistake and promised yourself that you'd never do it again? And then made it again? God knows I have. Now here's the kind of mistake I want you to consider most, especially with regard to talking about the world as it is now versus before. Let me ask you this. How many of us have had a desired outcome and actually created a well-organized plan where we executed it brilliantly? We executed it in a fashion absolutely consistent with our plan and discovered that we still made a mistake with regard to not achieving our intended outcome. In other words, we still failed. If this has ever happened to you, don't beat yourself up. Think about it. What used to be solid ground because of the explosive growth of information has changed. The fact is there is very little solid ground left these days for us to stand on. In many cases, most of our mental models have just not kept up. In other words, we have up in our minds as to what works and what doesn't. It's no longer a fit like it once was. It's more like we're surfing liquid turf. Can you relate? Let me give you an example. Imagine taking a transparent water pipe and drill a small hole in the pipe whereby we could insert green dye so that when the tap was on and the water was flowing, it would suck or draw the green dye into the pipe. Now, if the pipe was under reasonable pressure, what you would notice is that the green dye would show up streaming. I think the technical term is laminar. In other words, with the help of the green dye, you would actually see the laminar flow. Now, what's interesting is that everything appears to stay the same. In other words, the rules are that when water flows through the pipe, it flows in a laminar, stream-like fashion. Now, if you recall me talking to you earlier about when you had a plan that you apparently executed brilliantly, but that to your surprise, it still seemed to fail. Remember me talking to you about that, guys? Well, what did I say? I said don't beat yourself up too badly because the rules may have changed. Let me show you what I mean. Watch this. The water flows through the pipe in a consistent fashion as illustrated by the green ink. From low pressure to higher pressure, everything literally stays the same. However, if the water pressure exceeds a specific point, the rules actually change. In the real world, this is referred to as a phase change. Now watch this. At the exact moment that pressure increases, the water moves from laminar, or in a stream-like fashion, to turbulent. Sound familiar? Can you relate? What used to work, especially in today's world, prior to today's pressures, primarily caused by the information explosion, may no longer work. Am I making sense? What's happened in the world of pipe is somebody has flipped it. By increasing the pressure, they've changed the rules from laminar to turbulent. All the rules as we knew them are now gone. In that environment, instantly, all the possibilities which turbulence brings becomes available, and it's not the same as laminar. The critical distinction here, gang, is visibility and the ability to predict. Visibility and predictability, as my friend who you're about to meet will tell you, are key ingredients to wealth creation. If we didn't have that green ink, you'd never notice. The person I'm about to introduce you to has the green ink. For me, he has an extraordinary gift for making the invisible visible in a highly profitable and abundant fashion. How many people on this call can honestly say you feel confident in your future success? How many of us are insecure or fearful about our futures? How many of us are experiencing doubt or uncertainty about our careers? How many of us find ourselves coming from a place of scarcity that doesn't serve us or our relationships with others? How many people on this call find yourself spending most of your time and attention earning a living at the expense of being able to make a fortune? What you're going to discover if you commit to stay on this call is not only how the world and the rules have changed, but more importantly, what you can do to better understand how to master the possibilities and take advantage of the opportunities now emerging. So think about it. How would you like to dramatically reduce your financial issues, not to mention use the speed, scale, and density of today's social and business conditions to your advantage? As a street kid from the south side of Chicago, starting with nothing, I'm living proof, guys, and extremely grateful for it, that this can be achieved in a highly predictable and abundant fashion. Do you want to know what you need to do in order to make over $1 million per month? The answer is simple. Or if that's too much to wrap your mind around, $1 million a year or $500,000 a year, 300K, whatever that number is and that lifestyle is for you, it requires your commitment to staying with us for the remainder of the next half hour. I promise you, after I introduce you to my friend and mentor, at the end of this time, you will better understand what you need to succeed. You'll be much more fully informed about where we see the future of business is going and how you can literally take advantage of these turbulent times. Does that sound something that would be of value to? If so, make the commitment. Stay on the call with us the entire way. Having made that covenant, I promise you, we'll introduce you to several of the theories, methods, and tools that thousands of people that started with nothing have used to achieve extraordinary success. So the moment of truth for the first part of the call has arrived. Remember, when we first began, I talked about the fact that if you wanted to do something better, if you wanted to create transformational breakthrough, you had to take action, and that action had to be different in order to produce successful, better results. Remember different, better? Well, this is your opportunity to give yourself the gift of Marshall Thurber, a world leader in experiential learning, wealth creation, and one of the brightest business minds of our time. If investing the remainder of this hour with us could dramatically, literally, profoundly improve your success, would you? Marshall often suggests that you can tell where someone's at by where they're at. And I want to congratulate you. At this stage of the call, if what I've shared doesn't resonate or seem to fit, let me thank you for your time. I suggest you drop off. But remember, you can usually tell where someone's at by where they're at, and you're on the call. So if you're willing to commit to completing the call, I promise you that you'll be much more fully informed and in an optimal position to take advantage of the roadmap Marshall is willing to provide that will most certainly enhance your brightness of the future. So at this point in time, let's take a moment to let those who do not want to commit drop off. For everyone else, get excited while I take a moment to bring on and introduce my lifelong friend and mentor, Mr. Marshall Thurber. Hey, Marshall, welcome to the call.
Oh, thank you, Bill. I really appreciate you taking the lead on this, and I want to thank everybody who's going to stay on the call for the next hour or so. Your time and attention is always a gift, and I want to thank you in advance. My first question to you is, how important is experience to learning? That was the question that W. Edwards Demming asked me when I first met him. Now, I don't know if you know who Demming is, but Demming was the person who went to Japan and helped Japan and Toyota becoming the world dominant force. In fact, every major corporation in Japan considers Demming the father of their success economically. And when I met him in the basement of his house in Washington, D.C., that was the first question he asked me. And I'm asking you, how important is experience to learning on a scale from 1 to 10? It's 10 being high, 1 being low. When I asked that of Demming, I said, well, experience is the best teacher. And I got this from my dad. It's the most expensive. That's why it's so good. And Demming looked at me, and he, being in his late 80s, he got halfway out of his seat, and he said, nonsense. If experience is such a great teacher, how come Americans aren't making the best cars? They've certainly had the most experience. How come? And I looked at him and I thought, I'm paying him a substantial amount of money for this interview with him, and he's yelling at me. It didn't feel right. But that's how it went when I spent the next 8.5 years with him. Basically, that's how it went. Demming would ask me a question, I'd answer it incorrectly, and then he'd yell at me. So that's sort of how it went. But he was right. Americans certainly have had more experience in building cars. So what is missing if experience isn't the best teacher? What does it take to produce consistently profound results? What's going to change your future? Without understanding, you're going to continue to produce what you're producing now, which is going to be less than optimal results. I mean, you've got to understand this, and that is, consciously or unconsciously, you are filtering all your experiences through a theory. Okay, so what happens when you change the theory? When you change the theory, you're going to ask different questions. When you ask different questions, you're going to get different answers, and when you get different answers, you get what? Different strategies, and basically when you execute those strategies, you're going to get different outcomes. And what Demming did and brought to Japan was a completely different theory of business. So what we're going to do here is we're basically going to offer you an opportunity to play various simulations, get your theory out there on the table, and then we're going to look at how we want you to look at it from Demming's point of view. As Demming would say, people are being ruined by their best efforts. They're working hard, but they just can't deliver. That's what was happening in Japan. Does this make sense to you? You've got to change your theory so that when your experiences come through, they're going to come through with different filters. So the upcoming event, you're going to get a series of unique and dynamic experiences. You will then use the conscious or unconscious theory and compare that to what we're suggesting, based on the new theory, that is. And we'll ask you to look at the issues from a new perspective. If you think about it, Christopher Columbus had a very different theory, that the earth was round. The people with the flat earth were afraid to go where he went. Yet he was the one that brought the breakthrough, because he had a different theory, he took different actions, and had different outcomes. The world has definitely dramatically shifted. The old theory do not produce consistent, positive, profound results that you need to succeed today. You just have to change your theory. You can't do it with the old ones. You're going to get ruined by best efforts. So I'm willing to predict that the vast majority are working hard. There's no question. Demming used to say to me, you don't think they're working hard? They're working hard. It's just they got the wrong theory.
Marshall, that's a great point. I spoke earlier prior to introducing you about asking the question, what's missing that, if present, would transform your life beyond your wildest dreams? So let me ask those of you on the call right now, how many of you are confident you have the right theory based upon the results you're getting? How many of you would like to discover a different, better theory, like Marshall says, that will cause you to ask higher yielding questions, which of course will produce higher yielding answers, which will give you higher yielding strategies and ultimately significantly more success? Does that sound more attractive than so many of the issues and upsets you're dealing with now? Marshall, many of the people today find themselves dealing with what I like to refer to as in the price trap. In a time of extreme competition, so many things that used to be unique and special have quickly become obsolete or become a commodity. This has happened to such a dramatic degree that it's often now all about price. Marshall, I'm sure many of the gang on the call right now are either concerned, affected, or whether they know it or not, soon to be seriously at the effect of this price trap. Can you speak to that?
Yes. People will be focusing on price if two elements are available. One is a fully informed buyer, and two is alternative sources of supply. And if you think about it, the internet is going to get people what? Far more informed. So you really can't fight the structural change of the internet. But alternative sources of supply, you can fight. And that is key. And you can't do it by going and selling a commodity, because that's where price is primary. There's no longer product or service. They combine now and create an offer. If you think about your cell phone, your smartphone, what is it? Is it a product or a service?
Good point.
It's both. And what you have to look at now, that's an offer. But again, offers can be duplicated, and there will be alternative sources of supply. And when those supplies show up, then price becomes the issue. You have to play beyond those two levels, and there are actually 3 levels beyond that. And you can get there, but you still have to understand these other two so you're not caught in the price trap. And once you get beyond those levels, you will be in a situation where price will not be the primary aspect. You will be unique. Okay, so what's going to happen here is, if you think about it, what is a phone? It's a mashup of many, many other things. I mean, you've got what? It wakes me up in the morning. I can take pictures with it. I can answer email with it. And I can talk on the phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've mashed up all kinds of things in this little instrument that you carry around with yourself. It's no longer just a phone, and it's certainly not, just a product. So you've got to start thinking about, you've got to get beyond the offer to something where it keeps you unique. Otherwise, you're going to be caught at the price trap. For instance, my son, he wanted to be a director when he got out of college. And, we got out of college, starting off as a director doesn't work very well. I mean, who's going to hire a new guy with very little or no experience, which my son had none, and do a movie? Well, if you've ever heard of the movie Dodgeball, that was my son's first movie. And he was the writer and the director, with Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn as the lead actor. So he started right at the top. Now, that took a different theory. And
sure
he
did.
would never have gotten there ever by just trying to work his way up as a director. He started at the top. So you've got to have the right theory. And when you have that and deploy it properly, results like with my son are available to you too. He didn't get caught in the price trap, by the way. The same thing with Bill. I mean, Bill isn't the town janitor in Hawaii. He's also called the godfather of Hawaii, and he's also got a fantastic wife who is called Saint Rebecca because she is one. Okay? But he's doing this now in a town, quote, quote, janitorial business, the Jansen industry. And how can you make as much as he's making, well over $1 million a month in the Jansen industry? It's certainly not by selling a product or a service, because other people can do better at that. That's not where it works. And he'll be sharing exactly how he did it and how he continues to do it, how he continues to completely thwart any thought of competition. There's not even thought about it. He's got it covered.
Well, you're a sweetheart, Marshall. You remind me of, as you like to talk about, the 2 biggest mistakes people can make in business, especially business leaders. And I know you really focus on this issue of taking action and being in movement. Can you speak to these 2 business mistakes I was just
Well, first of all,
touching on?
if you get the theory, it's not going to help you anything unless you take action. There's only traction when you take action. So what we're going to have you do in the course is to commit to specific action steps that you're going to take when you leave the course. You will have a series of action steps with time that you're going to commit to take, because without that, this, of course, will be a waste of your time and energy and attention. So you're going to have to take action. We can't stop that. But if you want to know the 2 mistakes you can make, well, this is not mine, this is Demming, and it basically is you act when you shouldn't act and not act when you should. Now, we can't guarantee everything's going to work right, and you are going to make mistakes, and we've made mistakes, and I don't know anybody who doesn't make mistakes. But what we can do, by making the invisible visible, we can help you to increase the probability of success. And that probability is helping you not act when you shouldn't act and to act when you should. So once you increase those probabilities by focusing on the first 15%, then you're going to get there with amazing speed, or I like the word alacrity, You can do this if you just focus on the first 15% of your process, and you're going to get 85% of the outcome. That's about the best you can do. You'll be focusing on the vital few versus the trivial many. Remember, we only have the same amount of time and attention, and it's how you use that that's going to make the difference. I mean, Bill is brilliant at his use of this.
Well, you know, Marshall, to your point, I'm reminded of my younger sister, Laura, who's a senior executive with our group in Hawaii. And I often joke, I would have been a much nicer and kinder big brother had I known we were going to work so closely together. I've worked with Laura for over 20 years. She is an extraordinary achiever. Anyway, she takes her work very seriously. And she likes to get the job done in the most cost-effective fashion possible. She hates waste. And, you know, when you talk about this, I'm reminded one of the toughest things for us to learn, both as individuals as well as a team, has been this distinction you just talked about with regard to getting the first 15% right. For me, oftentimes focusing on the first 15% really means slowing down to get there faster. And this, for me, often makes me crazy and at times actually feels anti-intuitive. You know, in our early days, Laura would be quick to take the initiative and respectfully grab the bull by the horns with a mission-critical project. And I've always appreciated and respected that type of initiative and ownership. You know, metaphorically, she would be off to the races as if she were driving a state-of-the-art race car, utilizing our finest technology, moving as fast as she could, headed to the finish line. There were a few times when I attempted to tap her on the shoulder only to be told, let me be. I'm going as fast as I can. You know, the motor's tuned, the tires have the optimal pressure, the mirrors are trimmed. I'm even checking them every 5 to 7 seconds. Please let me be, she'd say. And argue that, you know, she doubted that I was going to be able to improve the process. And I remember a few times responding, look, while I appreciate you working all night, I'm sorry to point out that we're going down the wrong road. I mean, this is a classic example of us being ruined, as you said earlier, by best efforts. So I want to ask the people on this call, how many times have you gone down the wrong road? How many times have you thought you were doing the right thing, focusing on what you thought was effective execution before collaborating with the right theory? I call that suffering from premature conclusion. You know, today I'm grateful to report that Laura is an extraordinary leader and critical thinker, and when it comes to slowing down to get there faster, she has a habit of asking high-yielding questions before executing, both individually now or collectively, and her ability to execute when it comes to winning business in a highly profitable and sustainable fashion is literally profound. And, you know, we rarely find ourselves driving down the wrong road anymore, and as a big brother, I have learned to appreciate Laura far more than we were kids. You know, Marshall, I'm sure a lot of us on this call are curious. In addition to what you've already shared, what for you is the most, or at least one of the most important elements in creating accelerated wealth?
Well, there's an old saying, Bill, that do what you love and the money will follow. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Let's pick your favorite teacher you had in your life, the one that you really remember as making a big difference in your life. How much money did they make and how much wealth did they have in terms of dollars and cents? Not that there isn't wealth outside of that, but if you're looking to make millions of dollars, there's something that your teacher does not make, at least not as a teacher, okay? And then how come like a sports jock who's on television gets way, way more money, millions of dollars, and your teacher does not? Certainly that jock does not add as much value to your life as that teacher did. Well, it's pretty simple. One of them had leverage and the other one did not. Your teacher, as hard as that teacher worked, has a very small audience, whereas a football player could catch a pass, or a baseball player, any sport where it's on television and the leverage is huge. And that's what makes the difference. And you not only have your audience in the stadium, but you have it on television. And leverage, leverage, leverage. So you've got to figure out how to leverage whatever you do. My son makes millions of dollars as a movie director and writer. My teachers did not. So my son does far better financially, and he's actually, you know, just a wonderful son. But what's missing in your life, perhaps if you haven't made millions and millions of dollars, okay, is not only do you not have what we call dynamic value at the level you need to, it's got to be dynamic value that's properly leveraged. The lack of leverage is why the wealth isn't there. You may have great value, leverage has got to be there. So if you think about it, my son's first-time movie, director did over $100 million. That's the leverage factor. He only wrote it once, and he directed it once, and he accelerated his wealth. And he lives in a beautiful home in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. They call them living large in Hollywood. These are leverages. That's what you got to look at, is understanding that it can also work the other way. You can leverage it for the good, or you can leverage it the other way. So you've got to be careful, especially with the internet. So you've got to keep your integrity. No matter what, you've got to keep your integrity, because if it goes out, you've got the negative leverage of the internet. The internet can now go and spread this around. It can also help you if you're adding value, and people can then comment on your value. So you can imagine how much more fun it is and how much more money is made for people because they can now use the leverage of the internet. Now, employees are also a form of leverage. If you properly train them, get them to work with you, get them aligned with you, you can have a big company. Bill has over 1,300 employees. He has to get them aligned. He's got them all to stay on the common vision, and that's where his leverage is. Okay, so what we're asking you to do is to think about, you're going to have dynamic value. You're going to have to understand how it's leveraged, which could be through network science, okay? And you've got to understand basically the processes that make your results predictable, because if they're not predictable, that's going to show up in the internet and give you a negative on that, and you don't want negatives, and you're going to have your integrity. So you've got to make sure you have those available. And understanding these equations and the opportunities and the potential negatives is critical. It's completely changed the way success is defined in the universe. You don't have a vote. The internet's here to stay. All of these things are critically important. Integrity now is not a good idea that's a value. It's now a critical component. You don't have a choice, okay? So the golden rule has now become the key factor in your long-term success. You've got to do it. So you can't break your integrity, because if you do, you break your network. You break your network, it's going to get publicized, and you're going to go the wrong direction with your leverage. So look, guys, you can't deny the world has changed. You are probably working extraordinarily hard, and that's just not going to cut it. You're going to have the right theories, you're going to have the right strategies, you're going to have to ask the right questions, and you're going to take action with traction, and that's where the results are going to come from. So if you don't have the proper theories, none of this happens. You can work your tail off, and you're not going to get there. You're going to get caught in the price trap. You're going to have to learn to focus on the vital few versus the trivial many. You have to learn how to leverage your offering, all of this stuff. If this makes sense to you, then we can help you by providing you the beginning. Now, traction requires action. That you're going to have to do on your own.
Marshall, this not only makes sense, but I'm humbled and extremely grateful that it can make anyone, including me, street kid from South Chicago, who was a terrible student, but if you're committed to using it, it will bring genuine wealth. And, Rebecca and I are blessed with regard to financial wealth, but most importantly, with the kind of love and meaningful relationships and the ability to contribute to not only the communities we live in, but to future generations. I spoke earlier about how much pain I see in our world right now, and I know many of the people on this call have an experience of exactly what I mean. And it breaks my heart to see so many struggling when there's truly another option. It's all about asking the right questions and then taking action with the right theory. And Marshall, you certainly have made the invisible, at least for me, very, very visible. Rebecca likes to say, I can't not see it now. So if you're on this call, think about it. It makes sense, doesn't it? Think about what's at stake here with regard to the brightness of your future. There should be no question in your mind at this point that the rules of engagement have changed. Like it or not, we're all surfing liquid turf. So in these turbulent times, guys, has the world of business ever been more unforgiving than now? We no longer have the option of doing the same thing as before and having any hope of keeping up like we once did. Marshall, this reminds me of the time I flew my cousin Gary in from Chicago to Martha's Vineyard for a job interview. His expertise, guys, was in shipping, and our mainland companies were in need of what he had. So after discussing business over a long lunch, we decided to play tourists and hopped in an old biplane that resembled one of those bloody red Baron types. You know the kind I mean? So anyways, with goggles and leather caps, we sat in an exposed cockpit, and with the where the pilot's behind us. And so not long after we were up in the air, the pilot tapped me on the back of my shoulder and pointed to a long nylon strap that was attached to my cousin's brief he had brought with us. And he had failed to secure it, so it was flapping alongside the plane and was an obvious distraction. Anyways, we made the adjustment, and we immediately put the correction in and secured his gear. But fortunately, when you're flying at only 75, 80 miles an hour, the correction was minor in nature as well as the consequence. But in contrast, several years earlier, some of you may recall there was an Aloha Airlines 737 jet in Hawaii that had a similar issue. And whoever was in charge of locking the cargo door failed to secure it properly, and the result was catastrophic. I actually knew both the flight attendant who lost her life on that flight as well as the female captain who was acknowledged as a hero for being able to land the plane. But I talk about this because it's a great example how velocity magnifies mistakes in a much more unforgiving environment, and it also magnifies the consequences. So the point I'm making is making the same mistakes as we used to in years gone by will no longer have the same consequence. Making the same mistakes as we used to is no longer an option. So if you're going to be successful going forward, you have to embrace change as well as move from being a knower to a learner. Embracing continual education is no longer an option. So understanding these new rules of engagement is critical for you not only to thrive, but it's really a requirement to survive. So the simple truth is you got to learn to navigate in an environment of increased pressure, moving with extreme velocity, and with the ability to predict and or course correct, as Marshall likes to say, like never before. So like it or not, gang, we're going to be surfing liquid turf from now on. So I'll ask you again, how many people on this call can honestly say you feel confident with regard to your future success? How would you like to stop feeling insecure or fearful about what to do? How would you like to stop experiencing debt or uncertainty about your future career? How about the doubt as well? How would you like to stop coming from a place of scarcity that doesn't serve you in your relationship with others? How would you like to stop wasting most of your time and attention earning a living instead of making a fortune? Marshall, I'd like to thank you for your generous contribution, for spending time with us on this call. For me, it's always enlightening. I'm looking forward to our time together at the next event. As one thing's for sure, partner, I never learn less.
Well, thank you, Bill. And I want to thank all of you, if you were listening to this, for your time and attention. That, too, is a wonderful gift. And I'm looking forward to meeting those of you who want to commit to taking action, which is to show up and then take further action when you're using the correct theories that are going to help you make it in the whole new world. And that's totally different than what you've been doing. And where it's being taught, it's not being taught. So it'll be great fun to be with you. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, by the way, gang, Marshall has a habit of producing profound results for everyone who attends these events in a highly predictable fashion. He really does walk the talk. And he's always insisted that our sponsors offer to you a money-back, risk-free guarantee. So in other words, after you enroll and fully participate in the program, if it doesn't exceed your expectations, we will refund your investment. By the way, guys, after tens of thousands of grads, no one has ever requested a refund. So as you've learned, you can usually tell where someone's at by where they're at. And so I want to congratulate you guys. You've done whatever it has taken to be at the right place at the right time. Now it's time to take action and take the next step by making this risk-free investment Marshall is willing to extend. In my experience, successful people are people of action. They're committed to doing whatever it takes to break through and break free of limitations, with and in spite of any fear. So come play. Come and get it. Take the action and create a lifetime of opportunities and abundance that most people only dream of. And I mean it. This is where I started, with nothing but a used bucket and a brush, Truth be known, I actually borrowed the money to attend Marshall's seminar when I was 18. And remember the question I asked you before when we began? Do you remember? What's missing for you that, if present, would literally transform your life beyond your wildest dreams? For me, this was it. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to be with you and Marshall on this call. I encourage you to join us at the upcoming event and give yourself the opportunity to try it on. See if it fits. Remember, it's risk-free. It won't cost you anything except your time and attention. And if you don't like it, you can always put it back on the rack. No matter what, at least give yourself this gift to find out for yourself. Do what it takes to find out and make it happen, guys. Aloha, everybody. I look forward to meeting you there.